The gates clanged shut behind Elena, with a finality that echoed through the parking lot. And Dr. Aris pressed the remote control with the calm precision of a man who had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. Sarah smiled. Not her practice smile, but something crueler, something that belonged to a different woman entirely. "The experiment requires a final stage," she said, stepping closer. "Total isolation. Welcome to the end of your self-worth, Elena." 14 hours earlier, Elena had stood in front of her bathroom mirror and smoothed the wrinkles from her emerald silk dress, her heart racing lightly with anticipation. The Friday night had begun with possibility. The rooftop bar called the Vertex gleamed against the dark sky, city lights twinkling behind the glass railing like scattered diamonds. Elena stepped out of the brass elevator, her silver clutch catching the light, and scanned the room for her people. The ones she had known for 7 years, the ones she checked in with every morning, the ones she had chosen as family. She found them in the corner booth, their heads bent together in conspiracy. Marcus, Sarah, and Leo were leaning in so close they seemed to be sharing a single breath. Their laughter synchronized and hysterical. On Marcus's black iPhone 15, a photo glowed, a group shot from a beach Elena didn't recognize. In it, the three of them stood with their arms around each other, bronzed and beautiful, a perfect moment captured in time. A moment that didn't include her. Elena walked toward the booth. Her dress felt suddenly too bright, too visible. As she approached, the laughter stopped as if someone had pressed mute. Sarah looked up first, her smile tightening at the edges like a rubber band pulled too far. "Hey guys," Elena said, forcing cheerfulness into her voice. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was a nightmare." Sarah's eyes flicked sideways to Marcus before settling back on Elena's face. "Oh, hey Elena. We thought you weren't coming." The words were casual, but they landed like stones. Elena tried to sit down, reaching for the space next to Leo. But Leo didn't move. His leg remained planted firmly against the leather. Elena grabbed a small metal stool from a nearby high top, the scrape of it against the concrete floor drawing the attention of nearby tables. She perched on it like a guest, separated from them by the wooden table's edge. Marcus started talking about a cabin trip. He didn't look at Elena as he spoke. His eyes stayed fixed on his martini glass, watching the olive twist and settle. He talked about the bonfire, about how the stars looked so bright out there, about how peaceful it had been to unplug from the city for a weekend. Every word was a little knife, perfectly placed. Elena stared at him. The words seemed to come from very far away, traveling through water. "The cabin?" she asked. Her voice didn't sound like her own. "Who went to a cabin?" Leo turned to her with an expression of polite confusion. "Just a last-minute thing, Elle. Didn't think you'd be interested." There was nothing to say to that. Nothing that would undo the cabin trip or make her included in a plan made in the past tense, already lived, and memories already formed without her. Elena sat on her metal stool and watched them lean back together, their triangle closing, pulling away from her like a door slowly shutting. She left after 20 minutes, making an excuse about an early morning. No one tried to stop her. The exit door was heavy and metal, and it opened directly onto an alleyway. Elena pushed through it, and the night swallowed her whole. She was sobbing before she reached the bottom of the stairs, her mascara running in dark streams down her cheeks. She fumbled with her phone, a battered iPhone 12 with a cracked screen, and opened Uber with trembling fingers. That was when the figures stepped out from behind the dumpster. One had a lip piercing and a jagged scar running down his chin like a permanent frown. The other was broader, with hands the size of dinner plates. Elena froze, her thumb still hovering over the app. "Nice dress, sweetheart," the scarred one said. His voice was gravelly, spoken low like gravel being dragged across concrete. "Give us the bag." Elena pulled the clutch back instinctively. His hand shot out, grabbing her upper arm, and something inside her, some animal survival instinct that lived in her spine, took over. She swung the clutch like a mace, all her weight behind it. It connected with his temple, and he grunted, staggering sideways. The second man grabbed her from behind, pinning her arms. Elena drove her stiletto heel down onto his instep. The bone crunched and he howled, his grip loosening enough for her to break free. She kneed the scarred man in the groin, and he collapsed like a puppet with cut strings. Elena ran. Her heels slapped against the pavement, her breath coming in ragged gasps, her emerald dress streaming behind her like a banner of escape. A taxi materialized at the edge of the alley like a miracle. She threw herself inside and gave her address in a voice that didn't shake, not even a little. By the time she stumbled into her apartment, adrenaline had burned away most of the shock. She collapsed onto her gray velvet sofa and stared at her arm. A purple bruise was already blooming there, spreading like watercolor across her skin. The next morning, that bruise was still there. Dark and angry and undeniable. Elena sat on the same sofa, moving very slowly, as if sudden movements might shatter something inside her. She picked up Sarah's laptop, a silver MacBook Air that Sarah had left behind a week ago and kept forgetting to retrieve. The machine wasn't password protected. That small carelessness was the first domino. A Telegram window was open. A group chat titled "The Core" glowed on the screen. At the top of the feed was a photo, a candid shot of Elena at a party, looking small and sad in the corner of the frame. Elena scrolled up. Sarah's message appeared first. "She's just too much drama. Don't tell her about the cabin. Let's phase her out slowly so she doesn't notice." Below it, Marcus. "Agreed. It's easier this way." The messages continued, a chronicle of orchestrated cruelty documented with the precision of laboratory notes. Elena kept scrolling, her hands shaking so badly the trackpad was difficult to control. Then she saw it. Email attachments, PDFs, her private diary entries, photos she had never sent to anyone. She walked into the Flux gallery as if she was walking into her own funeral. The space was stark and white, brutally modern. A massive sculpture made of glass shards dominated the center of the room, razor-edged and glittering and dangerous. Sarah stood beside it like she had arranged it as scenery for her own performance. A champagne flute tilted casually in her hand. When Sarah saw Elena, her face froze. The smile collapsed. Elena walked directly to her, holding up the silver MacBook like an accusation, like evidence, like a weapon. "You forgot something, Sarah," Elena said quietly. "And I found everything." Sarah's face flushed red. "Elena, you're making a scene. Give me my property." "Everything," Elena repeated. "The cabin exclusion, the research protocol, the emails, the—" Sarah lunged. Her hand shot toward the laptop. Elena pulled it back, and in the same motion, Sarah shoved her. Hard. Elena's back connected with the glass sculpture. The entire structure wobbled, the shards catching the light and throwing it back at them like 1,000 tiny mirrors. Elena braced herself against the frame, feeling it shift and settle, shift and settle. Sarah came at her again, her face transformed into something feral and raw. This was the real Sarah, Elena thought. This was what lived underneath all the strategic smiles. They grappled in the center of the gallery. Sarah tried to claw at Elena's face, but Elena grabbed her wrists, twisting them, using a grappling move she had learned years ago in a self-defense class she had taken alone. They spun together, like a grotesque dance. closer than lovers, until Elena used Sarah's own momentum against her, twisting her arm behind her back and pushing. Sarah fell backward into a waiter. The tray went flying. A dozen wine glasses fell to the floor in a cascade of shattering glass and spilled red wine. It pooled across the white gallery floor like something fundamental had been spilled, like a boundary had been crossed that couldn't be uncrossed. Elena stood in the center of the glass shards, breathing hard, smoothing her dress. All around her, art enthusiasts had stepped back, watching. Sarah lay on the floor, covered in wine and shame. Elena turned and walked toward the exit, her footsteps crunching on the glass. That night, Elena sat at her desk and opened a YouTube video. A man in his 50s appeared on the screen. Gray temples, black turtleneck, eyes that looked like they had seen things. His name was Dr. Aris. Emotional neglect from a tribe isn't just drama, he was saying directly to the camera. It's a neurological emergency. The brain processes social rejection in the same circuits as physical torture. Elena leaned forward. She had never heard anyone articulate it like this. She had never heard anyone say that what had happened to her was real, measurable, neurological. Dr. Aris pulled up a slide, a diagram of a betrayal loop. And in the corner of the diagram, a logo, a stylized golden V, the vertex. Elena's breath caught. She searched Dr. Aris on LinkedIn, found him, clicked on his recent activities section. There was a photo of Dr. Aris shaking hands with Sarah, both of them beaming at the camera. The caption read, "Welcoming our new research director." Sarah, research director, 3 months ago, the same time the exclusion had begun. Elena's mind moved through the puzzle pieces, fitting them together with a precision that felt almost mathematical. The cabin trip hadn't been coincidence. The exclusion hadn't been random. The friendship itself had been a lie. It was all a study. She was a study. The doorbell rang Sunday afternoon. A courier in a blue uniform stood in her hallway holding a manila envelope with "Urgent" stamped in red across the front. Elena signed the digital pad, her fingers shaking. Inside was a legal notice. Cease and desist. Notice of intent to sue. Sarah was pressing charges. Criminal assault at the gallery, theft of private property. The date was highlighted in yellow. Monday, 9 a.m. Elena looked at her clock. It was 2:47 p.m. on Sunday. She had less than 19 hours. That night, Elena dressed in black tactical gear. A glass cutter with a suction cup sat in her backpack alongside a USB drive and a pair of surgical gloves. At 11:30 p.m., she approached the Aris Behavioral Institute from the rear. The sign on the front was discreet, professional, the kind of place where things happened that weren't supposed to be talked about. She used the glass cutter on the side window. The blade screamed against the glass, and then there was the soft pop of suction cup releasing. She pulled the glass inward and crawled through, her heart beating against her ribs like something trying to escape. Dr. Aris's office was exactly what she expected. Minimalist, cold, designed to make people feel small. She reached the desk and plugged the USB drive into the mainframe. The screen glowed blue and a progress bar appeared. Downloading files. Files named Project Scapegoat. Folders labeled Subject A, Elena, and Subject B, Control. The progress bar was at 15% when the shadow fell across the doorway. Marcus stepped into the light. He was holding a heavy Maglite flashlight, and his face had the blank, serene expression of someone reading from a script. "I knew you'd come here, Elena," he said. His voice was flat, robotic. "You're so predictable. That's why you were a perfect subject." He lunged. Elena dove sideways, and he crashed into the desk, the Maglite connecting with the monitor. The screen exploded in a shower of glass and sparks. Elena kicked the rolling office chair into his shins and heard him grunt. They fell to the floor together. Marcus was stronger, but Elena was desperate, and that mattered more. His hands found her throat and squeezed. The world started to tunnel, the edges of her vision going gray. Her fingers scrambled across the desk above her head, searching. And then they closed around something smooth and heavy and cold. A crystal pyramid paperweight. Elena brought it down with everything she had left. It connected with Marcus's temple and his grip loosened. He rolled sideways, blood beginning to trickle into the blue carpet. The USB drive was still plugged in. Progress, 87%. Elena sat gasping, holding her throat. She could feel the bruises already forming there, could feel each of his fingers mapped out on her skin like a signature. She had to move. The basement server room was accessed through a utility hallway. Elena found it, descended, and began going through file cabinets with methodical precision. There was a drawer labeled SR Personal. Inside was a birth certificate. Sarah Aris, born 31 years ago to Dr. Marcus Aris and Catherine Stein. Sarah wasn't just a researcher. Sarah was his daughter. The entire friendship, the entire cruel orchestration of her destruction had been a family project. There was a VHS tape in the drawer, labeled Subject Elena, Induction. Elena found an ancient legacy player in the corner of the server room and threaded the tape through. The screen flickered to life. It was grainy footage from maybe 15 years ago. Sarah was younger, her face still soft with youth. She was sitting across from Dr. Aris in what looked like a university office. The Mark's father abandoned her when she was 8, Dr. Aris was saying, studying some kind of file. Classic vulnerability markers. She'll be desperate for tribal belonging. Sarah was smiling, making notes on a pad of paper. I'll approach her at the campus coffee shop. She's always alone. Good, Dr. Aris said. Once you establish trust, we begin phase 1. Elena turned off the tape. The back exit door had an electronic lock, but Elena had memorized the security code from a wall-mounted keypad she'd seen on the way in. She entered it and pushed through the door into the cool night air. Floodlights snapped on, blinding her completely. Elena threw her hands up over her eyes, squinting against the white glare. When her vision cleared, she saw them, Sarah, Leo, and Dr. Aris, standing in a line like a jury. All of them wearing matching gray suits now, like uniforms. There was the sound of a motor, and Elena heard the gates beginning to close. The metal spikes at the top gleamed in the floodlight. She was being enclosed, the walls of her cage drawing inward. The experiment requires a final stage, Sarah said. And her voice was the voice from the basement tape. The voice of a woman who had spent 15 years planning this moment. Total isolation. Welcome to the end of your self-worth, Elena. But Elena had already spotted it on the way in. The air vent near the ceiling of the eastern corridor. A way that didn't require passing through the gate. She bolted back through the door before it could lock behind her. Behind her, she heard their shouts, heard the sound of them realizing their plan had failed, and then she was running. The maintenance corridor was narrow and poorly lit. Elena reached the vent, grabbed her multi-tool keychain, and began unscrewing the grate. Her fingers were bleeding by the time the last screw came free, but she didn't stop. She pulled the metal grate away and hauled herself into the ventilation shaft. The space was cramped and dusty, the kind of place where small animals died and stayed for a very long time. Elena could hear Leo's footsteps below her in the hallway, could hear him searching, calling her name. But she was already past him and moving deeper into the building's skeleton. The shaft turned and twisted, following the building's interior geometry. Spider webs brushed against her face. Dust coated her lungs. But then there was light below. A junction. An opening. Elena moved toward it, crawling faster now, the USB drive still secure in her pocket. She dropped down into a utility closet and let herself out into the early morning. The sky was beginning to lighten, that deep purple gray that comes just before dawn. The news station was 3 blocks away. Elena knew this because she had researched it yesterday, planning for every contingency except the one that had actually happened. That she would end up here, half mad with adrenaline and desperation, needing to tell the world what had been done to her. She approached the satellite van from the side, moving through the landscaping. A guard stood near the front entrance, but he was facing away, watching the road. The outdoor broadcast terminal was unattended. Elena ran to it, her shoes making no sound on the pavement. Her hands moved across the keyboard with the precision of someone operating on pure instinct. She plugged in the USB drive. Files began uploading automatically, the protocols she had copied, the VHS footage she had digitized in the server room basement, the emails, the research notes, everything. There was a button labeled Send All, and it was flashing. Red pulse, red pulse, red pulse. Elena hit it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the massive screen on the building came to life. The grainy VHS footage began playing. Sarah's younger face, Dr. Aris's measured voice, the words, "grooming the mark," echoing out over the parking lot. It was being broadcast to every television in the city. It was live. It was real. A black Mercedes SUV screeched into the parking lot. Sarah and Dr. Aris emerged, saw the screen, and Elena watched as the color drained from Sarah's face. She was screaming something, gesturing wildly at the broadcast team. But it didn't matter. The footage was already out there. It was already being recorded and shared and watched. Sirens approached from multiple directions. Police cars arrived, their lights painting everything red and blue. Elena stood very still. Officers approached her with their hands visible, speaking in calm, measured tones. They asked her name, and she told them. They asked if she was hurt, and then she looked down at her hands, covered in blood and dust, and said yes. They wrapped her in a blue wool blanket and took her to the police station. The waiting room was the kind of place that smelled like fluorescent lights and human suffering. Elena sat on a wooden bench, holding a paper cup of hot coffee that a detective named Miller had brought her. The cup was paper-thin and warm, the coffee bitter and real. Through the station windows, she could see Sarah and Dr. Aris being led past in handcuffs. Aris looked diminished, smaller than he had in his videos, his black turtleneck marked with a coffee stain. Sarah wasn't looking at him. She was looking at Elena. A woman walked into the waiting room. She had the same eye shape as Elena, the same curve to her cheekbones. She was wearing a yellow cardigan and holding a silver-framed photograph. "Elena," Clara said. She was Elena's sister, the one Elena hadn't spoken to in 3 years because of some argument Elena could no longer quite remember. Elena stood up. Clara opened the frame. In it was a photograph of 2 young girls building a sandcastle, their hair wild and sea-blown. The caption read, "True tribes never break." Elena looked at the photo for a long time. Then she wrapped her arms around her sister. Later, after the statements and the processing, after the officers had released her and the news teams had dissipated, Elena sat on a bench outside the police station with the morning sun on her face. She took her phone out and opened the contacts. The group chat, the core, was there, unchanged. She pressed delete. "Are you sure you want to delete this conversation?" the phone asked. Elena pressed yes. She blocked Marcus's number. She blocked Sarah's number. She blocked Leo's number. She blocked every contact from that time, that place, that version of her life. The phone screen went black. It reflected only the bright sky. Elena put the phone in her bag and stood up. Clara was waiting for her at the edge of the parking lot, her yellow cardigan bright against the morning light. Elena walked toward her,